I have torn apart more 5.3-liter Ecotec 3 engines than I can count, and there is one repair that walks through my door more than almost any other on the GM side. A customer describes a tick that sounds like a diesel, a check engine light for a misfire on cylinder 1 or 4. And when I pull the valve covers, I already know what I'm going to find before I even look. A collapsed AFM lifter sitting there dead doing nothing while the engine limps along on 7 cylinders instead of 8. After 24 years of pulling wrenches, I have serviced Silverados that kept active fuel management running stock for 200,000 miles, and I have serviced just as many where the owner disabled it in the first 20,000. The difference between those two groups of trucks when you actually open them up is not subtle. It is one of the clearest before and after comparisons in modern GM engineering, and almost nobody outside a shop ever sees it. Let me explain what AFM actually is, because most Silverado owners drive one for a decade without understanding what is happening under their right foot. Active fuel management and its successor dynamic fuel management on the newer L82 and L87 engines deactivates half the cylinders under light load to save fuel. It does this using a special lifter assembly with a solenoid-controlled pin. Under normal operation, that pin locks the lifter to the cam lobe like any conventional lifter. When the computer calls for cylinder deactivation, oil pressure pushes the pin out, and the lifter collapses into a two-piece unit that rides the cam without opening the valve. It is a clever piece of engineering on paper. In practice, it is a moving part that gets asked to switch states thousands of times over the life of the engine, and every one of those transitions depends on clean oil, consistent oil pressure, and a pin assembly that does not gum up. A customer of mine, a landscaper who runs 3 Silverados for his crews, brought me a 2016 5.3-liter with 187,000 miles on it 2 years ago. He had left AFM completely stock the entire time, never touched it, just did his oil changes on schedule with a mix of Dexos, one conventional and semi-synthetic, depending on what was on sale. When I pulled the valve covers to replace a leaking gasket, I found 2 collapsed AFM lifters on cylinders 1 and 4. Exactly the pattern GM's own service bulletins describe as the most common failure points. The lifters had visible wear on the pin bore, and there was a thin layer of varnish buildup inside the oil galleries feeding that lifter bank. That truck was still running, still driving, but it had been quietly compensating for a partial misfire condition for who knows how many miles before he noticed the tick. Compare that to another customer, a contractor who bought his 2015 Silverado 1500 with the same 5.3-liter engine brand new, and had a mechanical AFM disabler installed by the dealer's competitor shop before he even hit 5,000 miles. He wanted the tow rating and the power delivery without the cylinder deactivation cycling underneath a loaded trailer. That truck came into my shop at 214,000 miles for a water pump, nothing related to the valvetrain at all. While I had the covers off anyway for an unrelated inspection, every single lifter in that engine was a standard full-time lifter, no pin assembly, no collapse mechanism, nothing to fail in that specific way. The cam lobes showed even wear across all 8 cylinders. There was no varnish accumulation in the oil galleries because there was no low-flow AFM oil circuit cycling constantly. That engine had one less system that could break, and at 214,000 miles, it showed. This is not a coincidence, and it is not just 2 anecdotes. GM's own technical service bulletins on the 5.3-liter and 6.2-liter Ecotec 3 family, going back to 2014, specifically address AFM lifter collapse as a known failure mode, with GM issuing an extended warranty on certain model years for exactly this problem. The NHTSA complaint database has thousands of entries describing the same tick, the same misfire codes, the same fix, a full lifter and cam replacement that typically runs $2,500 to $4,500, depending on labor rates in your area. That is not a minor repair, that is engine out or at minimum intake off, valley cover removed, cam pulled, and every single lifter in the engine replaced, because once one has failed, the rest are usually close behind from the same mileage and the same oil conditions. Here is what actually happens metallurgically when an AFM lifter fails. The pin that locks and unlocks the lifter rides in a bore that depends on tight tolerances and clean oil pressure to function correctly. Over time, especially with extended oil change intervals or lower quality conventional oil, varnish and carbon deposits build up in that bore. The pin starts sticking partway, sometimes locking when it should collapse, sometimes collapsing when it should lock. Eventually, it fails outright, and the lifter either stays permanently collapsed, killing that cylinder, or it stays permanently locked, which defeats the fuel-saving function but at least keeps the cylinder firing. The permanently collapsed failure is the one that sends people to my shop because it triggers a misfire code and a check engine light that will not go away. The trucks I have serviced with the AFM system disabled early, using either a mechanical range disabler that physically prevents the oil pressure signal from reaching the lifter pins, or a tuner-based software disable that keeps all 8 cylinders firing at all times, simply do not show this failure pattern. I want to be precise here because I am not telling you AFM disablers are magic. Disabling AFM does not fix a worn timing chain, does not prevent normal cam and lifter wear from age and mileage, and does not make the engine bulletproof against neglect. What it does is remove one specific, well-documented failure mode from the equation entirely. You cannot have an AFM lifter collapse if the lifter was never allowed to collapse in the first place. Fuel economy is the trade-off, and I will not pretend otherwise. GM's own EPA figures show roughly 1 to 2 miles per gallon in combined driving from AFM on a stock 5.3-liter, more if you are mostly highway cruising at a steady speed where the system engages frequently. Over 200,000 miles at current fuel prices, that adds up to a real number, somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $2,000, depending on your local gas prices and driving habits. But weigh that against a lifter and cam job that costs 2 to 4 times that single repair alone, on top of the diagnostic time, the rental truck while it's in my shop, and the fact that a failed AFM lifter rarely announces itself with a warning before it happens. It just ticks, misfires, and shows up on the scan tool as a problem you did not see coming. If you are trying to decide what to do with your own 5.3-liter or 6.2-liter Ecotec 3, my honest recommendation from the shop floor is this. If your truck already has 100,000 miles or more on a stock AFM system and it has never given you a problem, I generally tell people to leave it alone. Disabling AFM on a truck that has already proven the system is functioning correctly on your specific engine is not going to undo wear. That has not happened. But if you are buying a lower mileage truck, or you tow and load your truck heavily where AFM cycles constantly under stress, a quality disabler is one of the more cost-effective preventive investments you can make on this platform. It typically runs $150 to $400 installed, a fraction of what you would spend if that lifter bank collapses down the road. If you found this useful, hit subscribe. I cover exactly this kind of platform-specific reliability data every week, the stuff dealerships and YouTube influencers with sponsorship deals will not tell you because it does not sell more trucks. The bottom line, after 2 decades of pulling these engines apart, is simple. AFM was designed to solve a fuel economy problem, and it does that job reasonably well when everything works correctly. But it introduced a mechanical failure point that did not exist on earlier small block Chevy engines, and the repair bill when that failure point breaks is significant. Whether you disable it or leave it stock, the important thing is knowing what you are actually driving around with under that valve cover and not finding out the hard way at 150,000 miles with a check engine light and a tow bill. Drive safe, take care of your truck, and it will take care of you. I will see you in the next one.